New York last January or February, and it was a conference, and everyone was doing the DevOps talks, and very few of them were actually technical. And I was like, oh, hey, they're like a lot less boring than seeing like the same shit over and over and over again when I go to OGS. And I'm like, I'm guilty of giving those talks over and over and over again that are just like really boring. So we're hoping to do something a little different here. And this is more around organizational laws, and laws being like maxims or policies or philosophical ideas that have been found. So just kind of like Phil gave a disclaimer, we have a bit of a sales pitch in it, but ours is contained to only the first 2 slides and then nothing else. So first 2 slides. I am a former Atlassian. I started working on the Jira support team. I was a product manager for some internal tools while I was there as well. I released the Markdown macro while I worked there. And since then, that's ended up in over 5,000 instances, and we estimate about 3.5 million end users licensed. 2016, I started Atlas Authority because I was like, hey, you know what? I see a lot of people having a lot of different problems. I think I can help fix them, and so started doing it. At this point, 10 team members. Our clients include Spotify, Priceline, Young and Rubicam, and it's actually a lot easier if I look down this way. And then product clients is like American Airlines. Tinder is a client of ours. I feel like we just send money back and forth. And hopefully in 2020, I won't be doing this. I'll be on a beach and you guys will be hanging out with me and we can be doing Mai Tais. So the actual sales part of it is, what do we do? Most of what we do is performance and scale. We work with very, very large companies to make their Jira less slow. We just got a national telco from 12.5 seconds average page load time to 4.5 seconds, and we have continued room for improvement. So we're going to keep working on that. I worked with Uber as well on this kind of stuff, so we're used to kind of that kind of thing. But we also do all the typical Atlassian partner stuff. We do support, we do managed hosting, we do license procurement training, custom development, la-da-da. On the product side, we have a bunch of stuff in the Atlassian marketplace. So Meeting Mate is, if you guys have ever used like Calendly, it basically allows you to book time on someone else's calendar. So if you're in a Jira ticket and you're like, oh man, I need to like talk to the reporter of this, and you guys have it, you can basically see when you can just talk to that person and book a meeting. And not this next version that's coming out in a couple of days, but the one after that will allow service desk clients to book time directly with an agent without a lot of back and forth. So we're hoping that'll make things better. Auditor for Bitbucket will analyze your code in Bitbucket, and if it violates company policy, we'll rewrite the code history. So for example, if you commit a private key into your repository, and then you're like, oh no, I fucked up, and then you delete it, and then you commit again, guess what? It's still in the code history. So the tool will rewrite your entire Git history and then block all commits in order to kind of enforce that. There's other policies you can do. It's very, very powerful and configurable, so that's one thing. Tableau for Confluence, we have that for cloud and server. It's exactly what it sounds like. You take Tableau data and put it into Confluence. iframes, pretty simple active user filter. It's an admin tool, and Markdown macro I mentioned. So that's it. That's the entirety of the sales pitch. So moving forward, the format of the talk. I need you guys to talk back at me as part of this. It's not a one-way thing. And I'm going to need feedback at the end. And everything is really structured around comics. Every talk I give has some kind of theme. This one has comics as the theme. So in this case, it says, we haven't been talking much these days. It just kind of doesn't go anywhere. And then, but I commented on your Facebook post. Isn't that enough engagement for a day? So I'm going to need a little bit more from you guys than just commenting on Facebook. So agenda here is overview is coming up. Conways Law, Goodard's Law, Parkinsons Law, Humphries Law, and Thors Law. The last one I named, so if that becomes a thing, I want credit. So keep it fast, keep it fair, keep it simple. That's our motto here at Law Firm of Rock, Paper, Scissors. Laws are important and they guide everything around us. You know, we have like literal laws that mandate everything, but there's also the laws that are developed by anthropologists. There's laws that are developed by economists, psychologists, etc. And so it's important to really realize that all of these things come into play with the work that we do. So do you guys know what this picture is? Or do enough people here? That's the Challenger explosion. So this was the space shuttle that blew up. And the reason that I bring this up is that ultimately, you know, a lot of what we do is not that high risk, right? We're not going to kill people with what we do. But NASA uses Atlassian tools. So some people will kill people using, you know, Tesla uses Atlassian tools. Ford uses it. I can tell you every single major car manufacturer uses it, right? Like, so it's actually surprisingly easy to really cause a lot of pain by screwing up. And a lot of people don't like to think about it, but at least at our company, I remind people that we have a lot of responsibility to our end users. And so it's really important. And the reason I bring up Challenger was this quote from the analysis report. And it reads, "Failure in communication resulted in a decision to launch 51L based on incomplete and sometimes misleading information, a conflict between engineering data and management judgments, and a NASA management structure that permitted internal flight safety problems to bypass key shuttle managers. The O-ring that failed and caused this was known 9 years prior to the accident and had been actively suppressed at the time of a launch concern on 7 different occasions." Okay, so, and the thing for me that is a little funny is like I read this and like you swap out like the shuttle language and you're like, yeah, that's my org. You know, like everybody's seen this kind of stuff, but I just kind of want to set the stage here that we can do better, we should do better, and that we have tools to do better, and that kind of this is where I want the talk to take people. So, Conways Law, which is probably the most famous one, reads, "Organizations which design systems are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structure of those organizations." Initially, when this was first written, they were talking about literal networks, like literally network maps that were being designed, but it's kind of become a thing about communication in general and product design in general. So I wanted to ask if anyone recognizes their company in the diagrams which have been drawn in this comic. Does anybody work in any structure that looks like one of these? A few nods, a couple. We may have seen this once or twice before.
Not to say which one.
Yeah, of course not. So I like to talk about Google Plus as a great example of this. Google Plus, when it launched, I remember going on, so my mom worked at Google, or still works at Google. I was like, oh, I got beta access, I'm so cool, I'm ahead of everybody. And I go on there, and their big feature was circles. So you could go in there and you could be like, oh, I'm gonna have a circle for my family, and then I'm gonna have a circle for work people, and then I'm gonna have a circle for very, very inappropriate jokes that no one else is allowed to see. And you're like, that's awesome. And then you're like, oh, Steve at work is totally down with those inappropriate jokes and will not report me to HR, so I'm gonna add him to that. And then something changes and you forget to remove somebody or you forget to add somebody, and it turned into this management nightmare. So at the end of the day, it became totally unusable, even though it was an amazing product. Well, if we go back and we look at the diagram for Google, guess what? That's what they built. And this comic was drawn by a Google engineer. So like, it's really kind of, it does exactly what it says it will. And what happens when we come to Jira land and we build systems that mimic our communication structures? We've all seen one of these, especially all the consultants in the room are like laughing because they're like, this is what we look at every day. This is really common. It's, you know, people trying to enforce a process using a tool, people trying to change communication using a tool. You can't go to your team and say like, oh, hey, you know, from now on, you know, you got to go through this thing and do whatever. Like you were saying, like you had to sell them on it, right? It wasn't that you made a tool that said, hey, this isn't going to work anymore until, you know, you guys wrote that out. It wasn't that like, hey, we're going to add a Gherkin validator, and if it's not written in Gherkin format, you can't start the story. It was that you sold to people, you changed the culture, and then the results changed. So it's really important to kind of understand that. And as we move from like waterfall to lean to agile to DevOps, and now we're like chat ops, and then it's chat SecOps, and I think it's going to turn into like dirty acronyms next. Like it's going somewhere. I'm not sure where, but all of these things, right? They're processes, and when people try and adopt them without understanding how to change the communication strategies first, none of these processes and none of these tools are going to do jack. And I work with a lot of big companies where I see these digital transformations fail a lot. So like, please focus on getting communication right first. So moving on, Goodhart's Law, which is when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. And the comic says, our goal is to write bug-free software. I'll pay a $10 bonus for every bug you find and fix. And the developers are all celebrating, and then they say, I hope this drives the right behaviors. And one of the developers says, I'm going to write myself a new minivan this afternoon. So my question here is, can anyone define the difference between a measure and a target? Anybody? Ethan? Yeah? Yep, that's one way to look at it. How would you define it in this comic? What would be the measure? What would be the target?
Measures number of bugs. The target is as many as you can.
So the measure here is product quality, right? They're trying to get product quality, but the target that they've set is not the quality of the product. The target that they've set is, have you fixed the bug?
Have you made enough bugs?
Yeah, exactly. So it gets into this weird, like, perverted kind of system. And like in Atlassian world, like SLAs is the most common place I see this. It happens all over, but SLAs is like the most egregious one. So like this is like very standard SLA. So we see like, number of tickets, date across the bottom, SLA breached, SLA met. And this graph actually tells a really revealing story, and it's not a good one. That's what most people don't realize. This is a really bad story being told by the graph. But can you read the graph? Like, can you understand what it's saying? What it's telling you is that you've set a measure, which is solving customer problems quickly leads to improved customer satisfaction, right? And everyone's like, well, that's true. I want all my problems solved quickly. Wonderful. So you've set a target. You've said, oh, you have to resolve these things within an SLA, right? Like, whatever SLA has been set here. We don't know what the number is. It doesn't matter. So what's the result? They're just closing tickets. They're just closing tickets to hit SLA. That's why there's way more tickets now. They didn't actually improve quality of service. No one's happier. In fact, probably this has just made things a lot worse. So just keep it in mind. And again, all of these laws kind of cascade to the previous ones. So communication matters here because it is about what you communicate and how you communicate your targets and measures out. Parkinsons Law is work expands to fill time available for its completion. So the comic shows somebody being like, I can't get any games to fit into my schedule, and then they're like, maybe I can cut sleep out and shove some games in there. But there's always more to be done, right? Ultimately, it doesn't matter where you are, but I'd love to hear if someone can share an egregious example of this, maybe.
That exact example.
That exactly. Yeah, this was me at 18. I was like, the whole thing was games and then girlfriend at the bottom somewhere. For me, actually, the best story that I can tell about this was when I was doing my my certified Scrum product owner thing, whatever. The guy was doing the training, and he said that he worked with a team where the VP of engineering had a very, very consistent thing that there was one bug that had to get fixed every sprint that was not on the sprint every single sprint. So no matter what you plan for, right, it's really easy for people to be like, oh, in Jira land, you build out an infinite backlog of like if you go to jira.atlassian.com and you see 14-year-old tickets, I think on there, I'm the creator of about 300, and there's a guy named Andrei Yakolov who's been setting himself as a reporter on the really popular ones I created, and I'm not happy about him. But like creating these massive backlogs doesn't work, right? And then this is what happens, right? This VP of engineering would come in and push scope changes every single time. In the end, this team literally ended up putting a fake ticket into every single sprint called VP's bullshit. That was always 3 story points because they knew that there was going to be 3 story points of some BS coming down the pipeline in the sprint. And that was the way that they handled capacity planning. What you guys do to manage capacity planning in your environment is going to be up to you. But at the end of the day, understanding that there will always be something else, understanding when to say no, understanding that you can push back by asking for a better definition of ready, understanding, like one thing that was done to me because I was being a big jerk about this at Atlassian, I'd find a problem and I'd be like, yo, I want blah, blah, blah fixed, this is a big problem, blah. And it would just piss people off because it was like always something every day because I was on support, so I was constantly seeing something broken. And so what my team did to me was they said, Boris, you can report as many things as you want, but only on Fridays. So you have to save it up, right? Like all you have to do is you're frustrated with something, write it down, come back with a list of it on Friday and we'll accept all of it. How much do you think I would bring in on Fridays? Nothing. Nothing. It completely shut me down. But work will always expand, so you have to figure out ways to control it, mitigate it, plan for it, use structure to plan for it. But there's always going to be a lot of things. So Humphries Law is that people don't know what they want until they see what they don't want, right? And I was building out this deck, and I was trying to find appropriate comics for each one. And for this one, I really wanted a comic that was like, hey, where do you want to eat? Oh, I'll eat anywhere. How about pizza? No, anything but that. One of those. Every single one of those has the person saying no as a woman. I was like, huh, that's funny. There's like no one had a gender neutral comic in that tone. So I went with this one, which is, honey, why don't we ever go out? Do you want to go out? Nah. It's a little bit different, but still kind of there. But ultimately in Agile land, be agile, be fast, get shit out, right? Like, I know you can do waterfall, doesn't really work, we know that. It kind of, if we go back to like first slide, boom, boom, explosion, like we did get a man on the moon with waterfall, right? Like it did kind of work, but at the same time, like we've moved on beyond that. So really start getting stuff out faster in front of your customers. I grew up in the Bay Area where it's like, we have the mantra of if you're not embarrassed, you waited too long to ship it. I forgot which one said that, but it's one of the famous rich people. I don't remember who. But the other thing that you have to remember is once you've gone out there and you've shipped it, you have to collect the information back, right? So Confluence-wise, customer interviews, super duper important, right? It's not just about pushing out garbage and then pushing more garbage and pushing more garbage and then being like, eventually somebody will like my garbage. That was like my product management strategy when I first started. It didn't work. So customer interviews are really important in Atlassian tools. You really, if you show them what they don't want and you're not listening to that feedback, you're not going to create what they do want. Yeah. And then Thors Law. If you got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I figured it needed a name. It didn't have a name. Some people called it the skin a cat law. I was like, that's a little morbid, but anyways, the Thor comic isn't really super relevant. I just wanted a hammer thing. Atlassian, like, really, this comes down to nuance. Everyone wants 10 million custom fields, right? Everybody wants 10 million unique workflows and status names. Everybody needs 18 different statuses for done instead of using resolutions. All of these things, I love that the consultants are just giggling for all. All of these things come back to nuance, right? These are all very solvable problems. They're easy to solve. They all really go back to the first one, which is how do you communicate? Communication structures, negotiation, bribery. It all works. The amount of, I go into client sites and they're like, this IT team will never let this happen. I say, I bet you one bottle of whiskey that I hand it to them and all of a sudden everything gets greenlit. People are surprised when I say that. They're like, you can't do that. I'm like, why not? Does it get the project working? Is everyone happy? Like, you guys have been butting heads for 2 years. Like, is it really a big deal to go to a team and just buy them a nice bottle of whiskey? It costs less than an hour of my time that you're paying me for. Like, what's the right way to solve this? So don't don't always just go, creating more custom fields, creating more duplicate work. Find ways to work with people. Find ways to succeed. And then that's it. So we went from the desert to the mountains. Any questions? Of which one?
Of the one where,
The work expanding.
The work expanding? My personal one? Well, I thought it was a good idea to start a company. The worst one of work expanding. Our managed hosting business.
Sorry?
The managed hosting side of our company.
Hosting?
Yeah, so we provide managed hosting for clients, and I sat down and I figured out the architecture that we wanted to have for it. It was very reasonable and sensible, and everything was designed from the ground up specifically to be simple, automated, maintainable, hands-off as much as possible. Then the engineer went missing.
Oh.
Then the other engineer had family stuff. Then the tech writer quit. Then, it's and it was just all these things snowballed, and it wasn't so much that the work expanded, but that the time to completion went from 2 months to a year. And I was I had planned 2 months, therefore 6 months, not 2 months, therefore 12 months. And so budget and delivery and all these things kind of got really screwed up. And in recent memory, that would probably be my most egregious situation of work expanding to fill time. Any other questions?
Okay.
I'd like to offer an alternative expression of Thors Law.
Okay.
When all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a skull.
So he said, if anyone didn't hear, he said alternate phrasing for Thors Law, which is when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a skull. I'm trying to make this a little bit PC. At least the slides, right? The audio, definitely not. But the slides, I'm trying to keep pretty cool. I'm actually hoping to apply this talk to this upcoming summit. So we'll see. If I get lucky, it'll have to be even more PC, and unfortunately, it'll get cleaned up a little bit more. Yeah, any other questions, feedback? Feedback is really valuable to me. I love criticism, so seriously, please. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you all very much.
Boris.